Hi there, it's Maria popping in to share some exciting news. Season 6 of Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap podcast is undergoing just a little facelift. And when we return, you'll find us each week on your favorite streaming platforms like Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV, as well as continuing to go live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Plus, we'll still be on all the podcast channels. So we're taking just a little break, and we'll launch the new season beginning in early January. And because we wrapped up season 5 at the end of October, we decided to bring back some of our most popular episodes to fill the gap. So if you missed these episodes, it's your chance to catch up on the brilliant insights, practical tips, and heart-centered advice from my guests for women in careers who feel stuck where they don't belong. Now, don't go anywhere because we're going to start this reprised episode in just a moment. Welcome to Tips for the Transition, where we have deep, meaningful conversations about life. We talk about how significant changes like divorce, grief, and career change can affect us, our family, our relationships, and our work, and how to move beyond them. I'm your host, Maria Tomás-Keegan, certified career and life coach for women, and I'm here to support you through the messy seasons of life so you can answer big questions like who am I now and how do I move on from here? If you're ready to consider new options, be inspired, and meet incredible women who are on this life journey with us, you're in the right place. You'll find something in each episode to give you hope and encourage you to move from panic to powerful, from rocky to resilient, and from upside down to right side up. This is Tips for the Transition. Hello and welcome. This is Tips for the Transition, the Career Transition Roadmap. And welcome to the podcast today. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan. I'm a life and career coach for women. And my vision is to create resources that help women navigate career and life challenges with more ease and grace, and to know they're not alone. So each weekly conversation we have is intended to help women around the world become more confident, resilient, and brave. So if something strikes you while we're talking and you'd like more information, please check out the show notes below the video so that you can get all kinds of contact information for my guest and for me. And I am really excited about today's podcast because we are going to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart and I'm very passionate about: thriving. I don't call my company Transition and Thrive with Maria for nothing. Now, it means different things to different people, and I can't wait to get today's conversation started. So I want you to meet Kirsten Beske, who is a former litigation attorney. But after the near-death experience of her 2 eldest children, she quit her 14-year law practice and pivoted into psychology. Then, after more than a decade as a psychotherapist, she pivoted again and is a life redesign coach for mid-career women who are ready to make a shift into their next chapter of career and work. Now, Kirsten and I share a passion for holistic coaching and teaching women to thrive. And she uses the principles of positive psychology to enable women to craft their next chapter by maximizing their passions, strengths, values, and purpose. And this allows them to wake up every day with more energy, passion, and joy. Now that sounds like thriving to me, and who doesn't want more of that? We call this episode Thriving in Your Next Chapter.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome, Kirsten.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Maria.
I'm really excited to bring your brilliance to our audience. So let's get started with a little bit of backstory. I alluded to a bit of your history in my intro, but peel back that curtain for us just a little bit. What led you to doing the work you do today?
Yeah, so well, thank you for that lovely introduction. But I was a partner at a law firm doing litigation work, and that was something I'd always wanted to do, and I loved it for a long time. But if anyone's familiar with litigation, it involves advocating for your client, but fighting with other people. And that takes a fair amount of energy, and you have to be a willing competitor. And I was an athlete growing up, so I was always a willing competitor and put up a good fight and was and liked my practice. And then I had my first child, and at our well baby visit, we ended up in a helicopter to a Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center because their heart was in a tachycardia. And after 3 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit, they figured out it was a tumor in her heart. And we ended up down in Boston and had open heart bypass surgery on our 3-week-old infant to remove that tumor. And happily, everything was fabulous after that. And and so we decided, well, what could be worse than heart surgery on your 3-week-old baby? Let's have another. And unfortunately, we learned the hard way that when my son was born, I was pregnant and I was at risk of having a preterm labor because I had that with my first. Anyway, then 9/11 happened, and Corey was to be born in January of that year, and September 11th happened in 2011. 2001, because that's his birthday year. And one of my closest friends died in one of the towers, and I was hoping to go to his funeral. And instead, I had my son a whole trimester early, essentially. So he was 1 pound, 11 ounces. And it was pretty traumatic. And he almost died several times, had some surgeries. And the great news is, after 3 months in the hospital, he came home before New Year's and before his due date. But it took a toll. And so he had some continuing needs for a while now. Today, he's a thriving 20-year-old. So we don't have to feel bad about that. However, at that time, between 9/11 and taking care of 2 kids, and one of whom was having a lot of medical problems, I really had an existential crisis. How do we bring new life into this world where we just had the attacks on the towers and in Pennsylvania and in DC? And how do we make sense of life, right? How do we bring new life into this world that seemed at the time quite crazy? And we may be back there again now. And so my discernment process led me to decide that my values of helping others wasn't really being met in my current practice of law, and that I was going to really be able to meet that more directly if I followed my heart and went into psychotherapy and into psychology. And that's what I did. So I went back to school, got my degree and master's in clinical psychology, and began a decade plus of helping people, function in the world and work towards thriving. But then I discovered the field of positive psychology, which is relatively new. So I was able to learn. Now we have evidence-based scientific studies on what makes people thrive. So instead of psychology traditionally studying all the ways that what's wrong with people, right? The categories of millions of names of what's wrong with us. Positive psychology is this field where we study what's right with people and what people can do to make things even more right. So I really leaned into that hard, and I got certified in positive psychology, and I began to apply it in my practice. And then I realized that it opened up for me this world where I could help anyone. No one had to have a diagnosis. I didn't have to work in the medical model. We all can learn these skills on how we can thrive. So I started to share them with people, got certified as a coach, and for the last few years have been helping women use these tools that I learned in positive psychology to help themselves thrive. So that's the journey that I have taken. Thank you for asking.
In a nutshell, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. And I love what you just said, because it's why I became a coach as well, being able to help people on the positive end of things, not having to, dig back into the, what brought you here, what made you this way, all of the negative experience, but taking where you are today and allowing it to propel you positively into the future. Yeah. So you've been through a lot of personal trauma. Um, Thank you for sharing that, and I'm so happy your children are fine today. Uh, but it can be a catalyst for change. So let's talk about that for just a moment. What do you think about that personal trauma being a catalyst for change?
Yeah, it's amazing how that is so often the case, and there's some really good reasons why it is the case. So, um, really, if you think about it, people's lives tend to fall into a pattern, and you're in a system. And what happens when you have personal trauma is your system blows up, right? Your status quo blows up, and your place relative to the status quo changes. And so this disruption to you and the system in which you're living just presents like these opportunities for growth and change that you were present before, but you might not have seen them before. So I always think of it, unfortunately, personal trauma takes its toll, right? We have to go through our grieving process. We have to make meaning of what happened for ourselves, and sometimes for the people around us. And that takes time. But in the course of making meaning out of the bad thing that happened, you can really, you don't, you can intentionally use it to broaden the possibilities in your life. You can use it to deepen what your sense of meaning and purpose is in this world. And you can really use the self reflection that it prompts to shift and change things that you may have been dissatisfied about before, that now you can really think, well, life's short and I want to really lean into what I think my real meaning for being here on this planet is. And so I think that that self-reflection, that personal trauma kind of has inherently built into it as you try to understand what's happening, really can result in a huge amount of personal growth. But again, I need to acknowledge, after you've spent the time to go through the grief process and after you're starting to heal a bit. I don't think that making big changes in the middle of trauma is wise, but there's a great upside to it afterwards.
Yeah, good advice. That's really good
Yeah.
advice. Yeah, I totally agree that it can blow your life up. Trauma, some significant event in your life that changes the status quo, as you put it, can really knock us off our foundation. And it does take time for us to kind of find our footing again. But then through that healing process, as we go through it, there's a lot to learn, a lot of lessons that we can learn from that kind of experience. So let's talk about positive psychology. First, give us a little bit more about, for those who aren't familiar with it, give us a little bit more about what it is and why it's the basis for the work you do.
Sure. So sometimes I like to use a visual when I talk about positive psychology. So the traditional psychology was kind of when you weren't at neutral, you weren't performing or functioning in the world at a kind of a neutral place. Positive regular psychology, clinical psychology would get you to that neutral place. Positive psychology is north of neutral, and it's the things that yes, you're functioning in all these major areas of your life, but how do now you can go more, be bigger, thrive. So this originally was coined positive psychology by Martin Seligman down at the University of Pennsylvania. And since he did that way back in the early 2000s, It has grown exponentially, and it's globally, recognized as a field of study. And so the great thing of quantifying it, like saying, oh, positive psychology is actually a thing, is that it prompted a whole bunch of more studies, right? So a lot of the researchers got in on it. So now we have these evidence-based studies that prove if you do this, then you will feel better, right? And so there's 5 major pillars to positive psychology. And briefly, they're positivity, so your thought patterns around positive thought patterns, engagement, being engaged in the world, relationships, having the quality of relationships that will help you thrive, meaning and purpose. So having that strong sense of your big why and what is driving you as a purposeful life. And the last one being achievement, which is the recognition that humans do like to achieve. And that is one of our drivers. So, and then more recently, they did add a V on for vitality to recognize the fact that our bodies and our health can be a big piece of this picture. Now, certainly you can thrive with chronic illness. It doesn't have to, take you out of the picture, but it certainly helps to have a thriving body as much as you can as you're moving, as you're trying to holistically be as full and fulfilled as a person as you can.
Okay, so I love this, and you keep throwing the word thrive in there, and on purpose, I know. And I love the word. It's one of my favorite words, and it's the concept of thriving is very appealing. It's not always easy to reach. So let's talk about what it means to thrive and how we can create an environment that we can thrive in.
Yeah, so, well, that's one reason why I do love positive psychology so much, is that the goal is thriving, right? So the idea is if you hit these pillars and you learn the skills and tools to work with your habits of thought so that you can work towards gratitude and abundance and positivity spotting, right? Those, if you combine that with the other things, the relationships and the engagement and the sense of purpose and achievement, the combination of those elements will lead you to the state of thriving. And so I think you were asking, well, how do we even define thriving? And so I have a couple different ways that I like to think of thriving. One way is kind of that idea that we have kind of a deep sense of well-being that's sustained over time and consistent, and yet has that dynamic quality of progressing and being vital to our lives. Other people will think of thriving as really only the positive emotion side of things, but for me, thriving is a deeper, more whole quality of life type of a thing. The other way I like to think about it, though, is resilience on steroids with a little accent on making sure you're appreciating the good things. So life has all of its ups and downs, and our ability to be resilient through that and our skill sets for resiliency matter. And if we can get through the down parts, and then really learn the skills to appreciate the good parts, with kind of the guiding compass of a purpose, I think that's the formula that's going to really lead to what I consider thriving. What about you, Maria? I'm so curious.
Yeah,
Does that resonate with you?
A lot of what you said just hits the mark for me. I think of thriving as, I think of it the same way you do, that it's very holistic. It permeates everything. It's how we feel about everything we do. I think about words like flourishing and blooming, right? I love the, bloom where you're planted and then go from there, right?
Right.
I love that one of the pillars, the last pillar in positive psychology, is achievement, which means we take action, right? We don't stay stuck where we are. We take action, we achieve. That's part of thriving. It's
Hmm.
it is it's kind of the essence and the culmination of
Yes. And
thriving.
for people who might be turned off by the word achievement, I invite you to substitute learning, right?
Yeah,
Every time you learn something, you achieve something. And so it doesn't have to be that external validation of achievement. It's not your gold medal or trophy that you bring home, but it's that internal sense of achieving that I've learned and I've grown and I'm progressing. That sense is the key part.
and it's a personal sense of satisfaction, fulfillment of purpose, um, helping others. Yeah, there's so much that
Mhm.
it can be considered part of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I just spoke to my mother recently, who's one of my role models, and she's older, and they had just won a bocce tournament in her community, and one of the fellows on her team, who was one of at the stage of life where movement was hard, but he still got out and played bocce. So they won the whole bocce tournament, and she suggested to him he take the trophy home, and he was so happy about this, and she vicariously was so happy for having him, helping him be so happy. And so I think we
Yeah.
have that other, like, we can have vicarious thriving too, where we
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Oh yeah. And that, in fact, I think for a lot of people, that is an essential component, being able to give selflessly to others, to make them happy, to satisfy a need for them, without expecting anything in return, and
yeah.
just being viscerally happy for them for being able to do that. Yeah, there's so much that can be. We could talk about this probably for hours about, what does it mean to thrive.
Mhm.
And, I would love to continue this conversation with our audience, to have them join one of our Facebook groups or both of them, and let's have this conversation, to see what it means for everyone else. But let's talk for a moment about, what are some of the obstacles that we might face, uh, before we can, pivot into a new chapter that might allow us to thrive.
Yeah, well, and I work primarily with women, but I'm sure that some of this can be generalized. But I do find with my clients, that as caretakers, sometimes when women do get the urge to change things, they start to get anchored or a little held back by all of those connections they have where they're caretaking of with their children or parents or partners, where they feel guilty if they're focusing on themselves. So some to try to reframe that for them into the idea that if you are being your fullest self and you're really thriving, you will bring along with you the people that you care for. And to just really reframe that as not being selfish, but really being a part of your role and as a caretaker and leader of others. Um, and then I also find that there's some confidence issues I see that some people frame as the term imposter syndrome, which I think I have a whole theory on why we shouldn't use that as women, because we just don't have the role models out there to give us that confidence that we would have otherwise. But it's the idea um, that if we have not accustomed ourselves to taking leaps of faith and challenges and doing hard things that we might fail at, we don't ever start. And so I like to help people build the muscle of taking those, of learning how to take imperfect action, even if it doesn't work out how you wanted it to, because then you're developing that muscle of surviving taking imperfect action, and you'll get to do it again and again. And guess what will happen on that next try? Things are going to start to work out. So between caring, thinking of it as selfish to do personal growth work, and then also wondering if they have the ability to even make these leaps forward are two things I always find as obstacles when I'm working with my women that I love so much.
Yeah. Yes, I work with women as well, mostly. And I agree with you. I think that first step beyond our comfort zone is always a hard one to make. And the idea of taking care of ourselves first so we can be at our best is another one. I think those are two great points to make that can hold us back. The imposter syndrome one, I'd love to have that conversation with you at some time. But what I think most about in terms of the self-care is selfish kind of conversation is that if we are not at our best, then we can't give our best. And as caregivers, nurturers, women, it's who we are. It's how we're wired. It's in our DNA, most of us, right? To be givers, nurturers. If we can't be at our best, no one around us who needs us will benefit.
Exactly.
So I think that's such an important point to make, that if you hear nothing else in this conversation, the way to thriving, and I love the way you put it, when we are thriving, we bring it along with us, right? We become the role models. We exert that energy, and people just get wrapped up in it, right? And we carry them with us. That's the point. That's the goal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to see the space for that, but it's possible to find it. Yeah.
It is. And you mentioned guilt, it's one of the most wasted emotions as far as I'm concerned. But we can get wrapped up in that feeling. And there are a lot of people who might make us feel that way. And it's up to us to kind of correct that, reframe that.
Reframe it.
Yeah, reframe it. Okay, so what are some of the steps, without giving away your best tips, what are some of the steps we can take to kind of set the course for what's next, and to do it in a way that allows for this good stuff that we're talking about, thriving?
Right. And then just to be clear, are we still going to be talking about some tips towards the end, or is this the tip?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Like I said, without giving away all your tips, because we're gonna follow this with your tips.
Okay, great. Well, so the path forward, in the way that I do my work with my clients, is to start with the foundation of you, right? And a lot of us haven't really spent a lot of time really getting to understand what are our core values, what are our inherent strengths, what skills do we bring? Often we do know that. And what is our overarching sense of purpose? And remember, at this phase of our lives, because we can have different purposes, right? Different sense of what's our main meaning in our life at different points, right? So depending on whether you've raised kids, that could have been your purpose for a while, and then they're getting older and you're moving into a new phase, and it's time to find some more places that you can make an impact on the world. And so figuring out your why, your big why for the moment, is going to be a huge part of setting that foundational place that then you can move forward from. And then once we start moving forward, in my experience, people's subconscious can come into play, trying to keep us in the status quo, because any movement out of your comfort zone, even if it's towards something you love, you know you're gonna love it when you get there. Those steps toward it are gonna feel uncomfortable. So we have to work with, how do you negotiate discomfort? How do you go forward in faith and take these imperfect actions towards your goal? And so that's where some of the mindset work that I'm comfortable with, where we unblock people from those kind of subconscious blocks that people may not even be aware of, that are holding them back. And the only time they realize that there's something going on is when they know they want to get to there, but they can't take the next step. So we work through those, and then you just have to develop that muscle of moving forward. In each step, I like to think of change as a stairway instead of a big jump. Each step of the way, you get to sit and redefine. Am I headed the right way? How does this feel? Am I still on the right track? And so through that process of small but consistent action, you find over time you've made huge change, and then eventually end up exactly where you wanted to be.
And that sounds like the path to thriving to me.
Yep, that's the goal. Yeah.
And I love the methodology. We work in very similar ways. And the methodology is starting with that foundation of you. If you don't firmly get grounded in that, it's really hard to move forward in a direction that really will serve you. Knowing what it is, who you are, and what it is you want, and then taking that inspired action to make it happen is really the path forward.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about your tips. This is the part that all of the loyal viewers we've had over the past 5 years tell me is the best part of the show, because my guest gets to share their practical tips and strategies. And it's why I call the show Tips for the Transition. So Kirsten, let's talk about your first one.
Sure. Well, I think that one of the biggest things that you owe yourself is to understand your why. Like, what is your sense of purpose and meaning in the world? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can just go into Google and type, I think it's Simon Sinek, your big why. But it's the idea of what is that driving sense of how you want to impact the world. And if you can figure that out, that's going to go a long way towards clarifying each decision you make, because you can weigh it against your why. So 1, know your why. 2.
Okay, hold on. Let's talk about that for a second. So what I wanted to add to that, and you alluded to this earlier, you said it earlier, is that can change. So don't get stuck with, what your purpose was, what your why was in the previous chapter. If it is something, if you're looking forward to moving in this direction, then what is it today? What's the driving force today? Mm-hmm. And don't be afraid to change what it used to be, because that's normal. That's the way it should be. As we evolve, so do our values evolve, so do our why. So does our why. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great one. Okay. Tip number 2.
Number 2, practice positive emotions. And so this is something that people don't understand how important it is, because, and I talk about this a lot, our brains are wired for negativity. We have a negativity bias from what we see in the world. It was built into us so we would survive on this planet. And so we spot negativity at a high level, and positivity we don't notice unless we actually work on trying to equalize how much positive and negative we see in a moment, in a day, in a week, in a year. So practicing some positive emotions. In other words, I'm sure most of you have heard of a gratitude practice. This is one of those evidence-based things that science has proven helps us feel better, spotting things that we are grateful for in the day, and spending some time focused on them. So keeping that gratitude journal, even though it sounds like so woo, it's actually based in science that if you are able to focus on the positive act of feeling grateful, you are going to raise that positivity, to help start to balance out the negativity. But that is true of a lot of other emotions as well, right? So practicing feeling abundant, practicing feeling compassion to yourself and
Yeah.
others, right? Those are all things you can cultivate and learn by practice.
And it's a choice,
Mhm.
right? It's a choice. So when that negative feeling creeps in, we can make a choice to reframe it, change it to a more positive thought, and practice doing that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love the gratitude practice.
Mhm.
Um, Science also says you can't feel gratitude and feel something negative at the same time.
Yes, and we
So why
challenge
not?
you all to try that, because it's if you try, you will not succeed.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So why not choose gratitude? Why not choose compassion, as you said? Yeah, I love that. All right. Number 3.
Well, so number three is just that the science also shows relationships matter, and this doesn't mean some hallmark version of romantic love. It doesn't mean any stereotypes of relationships, but what it means is for you to have humans in your life, whether they're very few or many, depending on you, to have humans in your life that you are connected to, that you value, and that you nurture the relationships. And the science proves over and over again that people matter to people. And so, even though maybe we take people for granted, you will feel better if you go out of your way to cultivate, nourish, and develop the friendships that you want to have in your life. And obviously, and we don't have to go there now. If there's people in your life that are not nurturing back to you, then you get to consider whether you want to keep spending time with them. But the science shows relationships matter, so treat them as such.
Yeah, and I we can go there because it matters that they are positive relationships.
Yes.
It matters that they are relationships that support you where you are today and what it is you desire, rather than people who are telling you you can't go do that, right? Those are the people you need to pull back from. And I like to think about the people you have on your what I call your personal board of directors, right? Those are the people you keep close, and the other people, that's your kind of your inner circle, right?
Right.
And the people who are not supportive are out here somewhere on the outside, and they don't get to spend the kind of time with you that you allow the people who do support you.
So
That's
making
really
those conscious choices. Yes, absolutely.
conscious choices. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay. Do you have one more?
I do have one more, the
Okay.
extra special bonus. And this is my plea to make time for fun and creativity, because we all get very serious around this learning, growing, personal growth, and yet making the time to play like you did once when you were a child, making the time to have fun, making the time to and space to create, be creative, maybe, whether you're an artist or a musician or an athlete, whatever your thing is, just to make that time to play and feel the feeling of that freedom and joy of play, because as adults we so often forget that.
Oh, that's a golden nugget right there. That is so important. And you're so right. We get so wrapped up in our day to day, the caregiving, the nurturing, the giving that we as women often do a lot. And I know there are men out there who do that too. Um, but we forget that our soul needs some lightness, right? We
Absolutely.
need to laugh and love and play and have fun. We need to give that enough time so that it feeds our soul. Yeah,
Well
that's a good
said.
one.
Yeah,
That's a really good one to end on. We could talk about this stuff for hours, Kirsten.
we could. We could.
We could. But alas, we have come to the end of our time. So I know that some of our audience are going to love to reach out to you. Can you tell us the very best way for them to connect with you?
Absolutely. The best way to directly get me is on my LinkedIn profile. So that's Kirsten Beske. So it's Kirsten, Kirsten hyphen Beske, Beske. And if you go there, you also will find a link to my Facebook group, which is my Becoming Boundless Facebook group, where I go live and share tips and trainings on that as well.
Oh, I love the name of that, Becoming Boundless.
Yes, it's a
Great.
nice idea. We can be limitless. We just need to start moving. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. That's great. I'm going to join your group.
Oh, excellent. We'd love to have you.
I want that. I want to be in a group that wants to become boundless. I think that's an amazing concept. I love that. And it is it's another way of saying thriving, right? It's
I
another
think
way
so.
to say it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank you so much, Kirsten. Thank you so much for your tips, for your conversation today, for helping us understand what positive psychology can do for us and what it means to make the choices that we can make to thrive in this life, no
Well,
matter what's going on.
exactly. And thanks for providing this opportunity and this space and all the good work you're doing for your community. It's fabulous.
Oh, thank you. And you and I will stay connected.
That would be fabulous. I'd love that.
Okay. And I want to thank everyone else for watching and listening. I really appreciate that you're a part of this community. And as I said at the top of the show, I love creating and sharing resources for women. So uh, if there is anything that resonated with you about this conversation, please take a look below the video for the contact information for Kirsten and for me. And reach out. And if you want to continue this conversation, you heard about Kirsten's Facebook group, Becoming Boundless. You can continue the conversation there. And you can join my Facebook group called the Career Transition Roadmap. And all of the links for both of those groups are below in the comments. So we'd love to continue this conversation with you. And then let's meet next time, a week from today on Wednesday, every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, right here. And you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Till next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, turning transition into triumph.